We're live on Instagram, Facebook, and Zoom as well. So thanks for joining, everyone. Welcome to our topic today. And the topic we're going to talk about today, I think, is a really important one that I've personally invested a lot of my life, a number of years into. So I'm actually speaking here, as I like to when I can, from experience. And the topic is why you need to write a book. Now, let me be very clear. The topic is not why you need to read a book. I'm going to take it as a given, although I could be sorely mistaken, that anyone who is into self-growth, which is obviously these Wednesdays at 12 p.m., anyone who's into self-improvement, anyone who's looking to grow as an individual is someone who is alive to the fact that reading is really important. Before I give this class, I've given this class a few times, I looked up a statistic. I wanted to know how many books are read by your average American over a year. How many books do you think the average citizen in America today reads in 1 year? In 1 year? I've asked this question to many audiences, and I mean, usually Jews, because I am a rabbi, that's my main target audience. I've had many answers, anywhere from 2 to 5. Somebody once said 15, and I said, halavai. So I think Pew Research did some research into this, and the result they came out with was 0.7. 0.7 of a book. The average in America today of how many books the average American reads every year is 0.7. That means less than 1. Personally, I don't even fully understand that. Does that mean they start to read, right? They're 1 book a year, get a little bit bored and then put it down? I mean, I guess it's an average, so it doesn't make too much sense. But what do you like? You get to page like 75 of 100 pages, you're like, you know what? That's enough for 2020. Let's put the rest away for next year. I'm not sure precisely what's going on, but something's off definitely when it comes to just reading. Just reading. I always like to point out that we, the Jewish people, we actually run the biggest book club in the world. And what's that? The Torah. The Torah, if you think about it, my friends, is the biggest book club in the world, right? We get together every week in synagogue and we read a chapter or 2 of this Torah. And at the end of the year, we make a big celebration. Actually, it's added on to Shmini Atzeret, which is one of the greatest days of celebration of the entire year. And we make a celebration just for reading our Torah, 1 book a year. So maybe that's the biggest celebration we have. The fact we were able to start and finish just 1 sefer, the Holy Torah, the Word of God, which is an appropriate sefer to finish. But that's not today's topic. Today's topic isn't about reading books, although the national average is sad, to say the least. It's about writing and the power of writing and where we see writing in Jewish history, even in world history, and why you, and when I say you, I mean you who are watching this class today, no matter what you think about yourself, about your knowledge, as somebody once said, everyone has a book inside them, okay? Everyone has the ability, and I want to add to this, I believe that it's an extremely important part of any person's development to write a book. I didn't say that you need to publish your book. I didn't say that anyone else even has to read your book. If they do, that's a bonus. I mean, the amount of people reading books, chances are they're not going to be reading your book or putting your book at the top of the list unless they're, your mother, child, or spouse. I mean, not that my kids have read my books, but that's irrelevant. Just the process of writing a book, my friends, is very, very important and will add to your personal development in indescribable ways. When I say that, I mean, I can give you certain benefits, but the benefits that I've had from people, and anybody who knows me, when I sit with people and talk to them, people who are successful or quote unquote unsuccessful, writing a book has a therapeutic benefit. It has an organizational benefit, but I'm going to give you the greatest benefit. And that is that I want to say that great people read, but great leaders write. Great people read, and what does reading do? Reading helps you think. It helps you grow as a person. It helps you take and imbibe and digest information from other places and other sources, as if to say, I don't know, and there's room for improvement. I want to grow and I want to learn. I want to understand even more. But writing does something else. Writing allows you and helps you to extend your memory and clarify your thinking. So thinking and writing aren't that different. I mean, practically speaking, there are going to be differences that come between them, right? Especially when it comes to editing. But just the process of writing something down, something that's important to you, anything, but especially in writing a book, something which has a story, because every book in the end is a story, right? Even the most mundane books, even the most technical books, they have a beginning, they have a middle, and they have an end. And all of our lives have a beginning, have a middle, and have an end. So when you read someone else's books, which we've all done, and we all can think back to a book that we've read in our lives that has impacted us and changed us, and that's great and important. But there's something else about writing, because when you write your book, my friends, you're doing something different. You're writing your own story, your own beginning, your own middle, and your own end. Even if that book has got nothing to do with you per se, it's not biographical or autobiographical in nature, I mean. It makes no difference. The process of taking a pen or typing today, information that's inside you, and applying to print is actually going to have an extremely important impact on your thinking, on your memory, on your ability to share information with others, but most importantly, yourself. Just the art of writing is important. We know that we are in the Jewish year 5781. One of the most famous questions that every rabbi dreads, I actually wrote about it in my first book, is how could the world be 5,781 years old when we know scientifically the world existed for millions, if not billions of years? And there's many answers to this question. I'd like to give you one that I think is actually really relevant to today's topic of writing. And that is that it could well be that the world existed for billions of years before. There's no problem in Jewish thought by believing that. Many people see each day of creation, right, before mankind turned up on day 6, as being millions, if not billions of years. It makes no difference. But for us, the main part of creation, and the thing that Torah is obsessed with, my friends, is creation of mankind. The soul was given to Adam, and whatever happened, even evolutionary-wise, till we got to this point, is not so, sounds weird, but not so relevant to us. We care about mankind and their choices. We care about mankind and their choices. And so when we see mankind, what we mean is that the soul was put inside Adam Harishon. That's when mankind began. Can you see the soul? Is there some way to be able to see the soul of mankind, of Adam Harishon? Is that possible? Can we see? Well, I don't know how we can see because it happened thousands of years ago. But there is one sign of a neshama, say the rabbis, and that is writing. Writing. I can't see my ancestors reading, but writing, the scientists tell us, social scientists tell us, that the first evidence of writing, that which separates the soul of a human from the soul of an animal, which are not the same and not even remotely connected, is the first time we see writing was about 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. And so writing is the side, the evidence of the neshama speaking. So as I said, we all think, and you think by reading and learning and hearing information. But there's a side of a person. In order to grow as an individual, there must be writing involved. Writing is a siman. It is a sign that the neshama is inside the person. And the evidence is that people were writing Adam Rishon from 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. So he said that great people read. And in order to become great as an individual, you need to read. But great leaders write. Where do we see this idea? Where do we see the idea that writing is connected to leadership? Well, if you look back historically, it's most certainly and very evidenced in our Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu was told to write down these divreim, these words. It wasn't enough just to discuss the Torah, and there was a discussion. There was an oral Torah, a Torah She'ba'al Peh, and that's important. In order to have a dynamic of discussion and growth, there needs to be an element that is always open to interpretation and understanding. But Moshe Rabbeinu was also told to write down the Torah. And in the Torah itself, there is a mitzvah for every Jewish person, according to many commentators, to write their own Torah, their own version. That means we have to sit down and write an entire Torah. Now, for most people, they don't have that skill. They don't have that ability, right? Most Jewish people don't even know how to probably write Hebrew at this point, unfortunately. They don't have that ability. And so we are able to employ somebody else, a sofer, to write down for us. And maybe we can fulfill this mitzvah of writing the Torah, and the commentators, by writing one letter in the Torah, because every letter is precious in the Torah, just like every Jew is precious. And so by just writing one letter, without that one letter, the Torah will be pasul. In order for a Torah to be kosher, every single letter needs to be in there. Just like every single Jew needs and has a purpose and a mission among the Jewish people. So every letter is precious and important. So maybe just by writing one letter, to the commentators, you fulfill your mission of writing a Torah. Some say just by buying books and by sharing books, we fulfill this mitzvah today. But the original mitzvah was to write. Just write it down, because you can think Torah, you can talk Torah, but when you write it down, it becomes yours in a very different way. And once again, the title of this talk is You Should Write a Book, and I mean that sincerely. I am hoping everyone takes this on at some point in their lives to write a book, and I'm going to give you some advice on how to do it. I wouldn't call myself, unfortunately, a great writer, but I write, and I did have the opportunity to have a few books published. But the process of writing those books has never left me. And I'm going to explain to you why. But let's first of all talk a little bit about somebody else who was told to write. And we said that leaders write. Great people read. But if you want to become a leader, you're going to have to write down your thoughts. Not only for other people, but also for yourself. And we see that with kings. There's a special mitzvah for a king who is, if you will, the greatest political and military leader among the Jewish people, to write. We already have prophets, and prophets by definition are speaking, but usually writing as well. That's why we have the words of the Nevi'im, the writers as well. And we have the Kohanim, the other leaders, who would teach children, and part of the process of teaching children, of course, right, v'shinantam levanecha, is to write for them and teach them how to write. But you know what else? The king. And the king is a mitzvah, as a great leader, to not only write one book like the rest of us, but to write 2 Torot, 2 Torahs. That's what a king has to do. And not only that, he would take these 2 Torahs and he would leave one in his palace and he would take one with him. That means in order to be a king of Israel, you need to walk around all the time with a Torah that you wrote. It's an amazing thing. We don't have that obligation. You write a Torah, you can donate it to your local synagogue, your community, Israel, the Kotel, maybe the army. There's great people that sponsor Sifrei Torah for the army in Israel. It's a beautiful mitzvah. But the king had to do something in addition to that. They had to write a Torah, 2 Torahs. One they kept inside the palace, right, in their treasury. and the other they carried with them all the time. We're told that this changed the king. Why would this be? Why would the king writing something that he wrote, a book that he wrote on his personage, going to impact him in such a way? Well, I like to describe this with a story of something that happened to me many years ago. A friend of mine was told to transport a Torah from Israel to Chutz La'aretz. You know, writing a Torah, as a side point, if you ever want to do it, they're much cheaper when you write them in Israel. Okay? Even mezuzot are cheap in Israel. So most Torah and most mezuzot, tefillin, are written in Israel. So he had to transport a Torah from Israel to London. And he said he was a young guy, 19, 20, and he's walking around the airport holding a Torah. And he's walking around and he found there was some young woman sitting there, of religious whatever. And he gets talking to her and he's schmoozing with her. He's like, wow, this is really weird. I'm like, talking to this girl, was she Jewish? Was she not? I don't even know. I was talking about things I shouldn't be. And I felt I'm holding a Torah. Yikes. How exactly can I be talking with this young lady holding a Torah? So he excused himself and walked away. And then he's walking around the airport and he goes to the store to buy some food. And he sees some delicious food there. Was it kosher? Was it not kosher? He's like, how can I eat non-kosher food when I'm holding a Torah? And then he ended up getting on the phone with his mother. He's about to start shouting, get into an argument. He's like, how can I shout at my mother when I'm holding a Torah? And he found that all of his behavior changed just by the fact he was holding this Torah in his arm. I believe this is one of the reasons. By the way, he did revert back to who he was before, after the Torah, but now he actually became, he's actually a rabbi right now. He doesn't work as a rabbi, but he is a rabbi. How much does a person's character change by just holding a book? How much would your character change by you carrying around a book that you wrote, which had inside it all the ideals, all the encouragement, all of the purpose, the mission, the vision of who you are as a person? No one else has to read it. It's yours and yours alone. But just the process of writing that down, knowing it exists, not just stuck in your head as some kind of ethereal kind of thinking that's floating around, but it's been concretized and written from pen to paper. That's your book that you carry with you your entire life. That's a very, very powerful motivator. And maybe that's why great leaders are told not just to read, but they're told to write as well. One of the great Jewish leaders of Jewish history, great tzaddikim, and someone who seemingly made very few mistakes. But what's amazing is that he did make a mistake, and it involves books. And it's Joshua. Joshua took over from Moshe Rabbeinu. And the night before he was going to enter into the land of Israel, he was told, he reads the book of chapter Joshua, chapter 1, verse 8. Lo yamush sefer Torah zemepicha. This book of the law should not leave your mouth. V'higita bo yom v'layla. You should, meditate on it night and day, or day and night, laman tishmor, in order to guard, lasot, and to do, kachol hakatuv bo, everything that's in it, ki as tasliach, because then you'll be successful, et derachecha v'as skill, and that's going to become wise, smart, and successful. And the night before he went into battle, the first ever battle, the battle of Jericho, of Jericho, he was practicing his warfare. Joshua had his sword out and he's swinging it around and getting ready for warfare. And the weirdest thing happens, something you don't see happening too much in the books of the prophets, which we've now entered into with the book of Joshua. An angel appeared to him and said, what are you doing? He says, I got a battle tomorrow. I got to get ready for the battle. And the angel says, I'm going to have to kill you. It's like, I'm sorry, what? I'm the appointed leader of the Jewish people after Moses. God told me that I'm going to go into Israel and take over the country. And the malach, the angel, said to him, no, your job is to lead. And to lead, practicing warfare, is not for you. You may be able to take part of it, but you need to study. And he was admonished, and he was makabli, accepted it and kept his job, thank God, because he did a very good job of winning wars and actually fighting himself in these wars in the land of Israel. But before you go to battle, The battle isn't always fought on the battlefield. It's fought in the battlefield of the mind. And there is no better preparation that we see from Kings and Joshua than writing your own book. Because when you write a book, you are creating a memory. Memories exist in our minds, but the word zecher, memory in Judaism, whenever you see it mentioned, when it comes to Pesach, we have to remember the exodus from Egypt. Shabbat, we have to remember that God created the world and everything in it. The word zecher always involves an action. Always involves an action, doing something. One of the greatest actions that you can take with your life is to take your thinking, and everyone has thoughts and ideas from things they've read, heard, and experienced, and putting it down into your own book. Writing a book. How are you going to do this, by the way? But I say, what's the secret to writing a book? I'll be honest with you, I don't know. But what I was told to do, which I did, was just write. You're taking your thinking and creating a memory for yourself. It used to be that, I did this as a kid. I don't even have them anymore. But I went through a phase, and I know people do this, who write diaries of their lives. This is an extremely important focus. I know people who will not go to sleep until they've written their diary. That diary is your book. It's extremely therapeutic. I've been to certain advisors of mine, and I've spoken about a problem that I've been struggling with. And I come to these advisors. Think of someone in particular who I deal with, not even a rabbi, by the way, a very great spiritual leader of mine, but not a rabbi. And I go to him when I'm dealing with really big, deep problems that are making me cry and go crazy. And I've been to him a few times. And I remember him saying to me, I don't know the answer to your problem, he said to me. I don't know what it is. And I also don't think that you know the answer to your problem. But this is what you should do. Take a pen and take a paper, which I did. And my wife saw me do this. And just write. Write it down. Suddenly, your soul, as we said, the neshama's print is writing. The ability to write is a sign of a live soul. Suddenly, just writing it down concretizes it. And maybe scientifically, you can ask people using a different part of your brain to write and think. I think they're connected, right? But you're concretizing and you're creating, and suddenly you get a level of clarity that you've never had before. So what's the secret to writing a book? I told you what I was told, and it worked. I've had the honor of publishing a few books. I don't know who've read them. I don't know if it's impacted people. But as I said, the purpose of writing a book is not to publish it. The purpose of writing a book is that you need to write a book. The process of writing itself is highly therapeutic. It's going to give you a vision and a clarity. It's going to hold you accountable. And it's a project. It really is a project. The comparison that was given to me when I started writing my first book, and I didn't understand it until I went through it, is like giving birth. I'm not saying I've ever given birth or I could stand the pain of giving birth. However, as a metaphor, it works well. Because birth it starts off nice and easy. And you tell everyone, I'm writing a book, and this is my book, and this is my title. And if you're like me, you're turning to people for contributions in order to write the book because you need to sponsor it. And then it just goes on and on. Actually, it doesn't take that long to write a book. To just throw out all these ideas onto a piece of paper. When it comes to editing it, which means organizing it and concretizing it and making it right and, dotting the I's and crossing the, that's when it really becomes difficult. And eventually, every writer that I've ever spoken to, and I spoke to many before I wrote my books, they all said, there gets to a point when you think it's never coming out. Just like any mother who says, this baby ain't going to come out. But as the doctor told my wife, when she went overdue by 2 weeks, I never met one baby that wants to stay in there. They all want to come out eventually. It's the same with a book. No matter how difficult and how challenging, eventually, it's going to want to come out. So writing is a skill, and writing well, which I don't think I have, but is a great skill. However, as a college professor and seeing a lot of writing, and maybe, I don't know if it's like a chicken and egg thing, right? That writing has become abysmal. Forget punctuation, right? Forget that. Forget spelling, because People just don't know how to spell anymore. We'll just leave that aside. But just the art of writing itself has been lost. And this is a really, really important skill that we, the Jewish people, have lived by. Because every book you've read that you've enjoyed, somebody wrote. Somebody actually had the presence of mind and the ability to just sit down. It's not such a great ability. Trust me. If you can think, you can write. Write well, becoming a great publisher. And by the way, trust me, you do not want to write a book in order to make money. Because the worst way to make money is writing a book. The amount of hours you're going to put into this project is not, unless you're, some kind of J.K. Rowling or whatever, or God, your book's not going to become a bestseller. But that's okay. Just the process of sitting down, of starting something and continuing that thing and then finishing it, even if it doesn't get to a publisher, which nowadays most books don't, right? Just the process of doing it and having that vision, that commitment that you started and finished is an incredible, incredible thing. And I spoke in the past about people who go through recovery, right? From addiction of drugs, right? Or abusive homes or abusive childhoods or relationships. The process of writing is so cathartic. It really, really is a tremendous healing process. I don't know why writing it down is different just thinking it. I'm not sure, but the act of putting pen to paper is incredible in helping you recover as an individual and grow as a human. We're told that Megillah, right? The Megillah, Esther, was written by Esther and Mordechai. Right? It was named after her because when we get to Purim, we'll discuss, God willing, that she was the heroine. She was the one who really took life and death into her hands. But I heard someone say, we can learn from Esther something really, really important, that everyone has their own Megillah, right? And that's one of the reasons that all the books of Nach, of the prophets and writings, says the Rambam, it's an amazing thing he says, are going to disappear when Mashiach comes. We're not going to need them anymore. They're going to be lost to history and won't be necessary because most of them describe Jewish history up to Mashiach. Once Mashiach comes, they're not needed anymore. But there's one exception from all the books, right? Obviously including the Torah, because that's where we get our mitzvot from. But besides the Torah, there's one other book from all of scriptures that will exist into and beyond the Messianic era, and that is the book of Esther. That book that details their lives, that writing that Esther poured her heart into, and Mordechai threw himself into as well, that they had to persuade people to accept. So if you have trouble finding a publisher, do not worry. Those books, that book of Megillat Esther creates us. That book of Megillat Esther created them, and therefore it can't go away. It must be, as the Megillah says there, le'olam, forever. And that, my friends, is why everyone has a Megillah inside them. Okay? Their own personal book. And so reading is good. Reading is good, right? I went to David Ben-Gurion's house in Tel Aviv. It's a museum. The guy had 20,000 books. 20,000 books. Right? You can't make it up. Right? We are known in many cultures, right? Not just in Hebrew or English, right? The people of the book. There's a reason why, because we are voracious readers, but we are also voracious writers as well. Okay, so let's just summarize. Everyone has a book inside them. It's cathartic, it's good. It concretizes, it gives you a purpose to live. It gives you a mission, it gives you clarity. It gives you and makes you accountable for something that you start and you finish. Forget about if anyone reads it. That's just a bonus. It's not about the reader. It's about the writer, him or herself. How to do it? Literally just sit and write. Don't think chapter. Don't think title. Just the process. You'll find that some part of your soul becomes ignited when you start to write. Dare I say it? You can even start the writing with a pen and paper. Try to build up that lost skill. But even if you have a clear sheet, just having a clear piece of paper on your screen and it's just you, does wonders. Try it for a page or two, right? Thoughts, ideas that you have, eventually, when that reaches a certain point, that will become your own personal Megillah. As the Torah says, this Torah that you write about your own personal Torah, your own personal Megillah, will be with you forever, that you'll be able to contemplate it for the rest of your life and have something else to pass on to the next generation. Thank you for joining. Hope you enjoyed this. God willing, I hope to see you all next week. Tonight, we have another class. Those who are able to join us, myself, Rabbi Mizrahi, Rabbi Fahi, Rabbi Abragamo will be giving a tribute to Mr. Safra tonight in Safra Synagogue on Hanukkah. Lighten up. That will be tonight. You're welcome to join us live or online. And if not, I will see you all next week. Have a wonderful and beautiful Hanukkah and great miracles for our people. Thank you, everyone.